series acclamation mill. But in the interest of not being mocked relentlessly by my fellow cadets, I'm going with Sam.
Please repeat. I can't understand.
I'm on rotation in the Beta Quadrant with the third years. However, per the Chancellor, this class has been mandated for you, so you get me early.
You know a show is in trouble when a therapy session in a Star Trek series turns into a group of cadets literally acting out a stage play to process their trauma, and somehow that's treated like deep storytelling.
What if I told you that theater is one of the most powerful tools for social and political change? Theater is statecraft. Statecraft is theater.
That's exactly the kind of chaos that Starfleet Academy has become. And in this video, we're breaking down how a show with so much potential ended up losing its audience so fast. Because at this point, watching this show feels less like following a story and more like watching the writers throw random ideas at the wall and hoping nobody notices. One week, the characters are dealing with catastrophic, life-changing events. The next week, those same characters act like nothing happened. Then the episode suddenly pivots into theater therapy, long speeches about feelings, and plot lines that barely connect to the last episode. And every time a new episode drops, fans sit down thinking, maybe this is where it finally starts making sense. But by the end of the hour, they're usually left asking the opposite question. How did it get even more confusing than last week? Because once you start looking at the pattern across the season, the issue with Starfleet Academy becomes painfully clear. The show isn't building toward anything. It just keeps resetting itself. At the center of the frustration is something surprisingly simple. The show doesn't feel like it was written with any kind of plan. Take the early episode where one of the cadets delivers a long emotional speech about learning responsibility after a mission goes wrong. It's framed like a turning point. The music swells, the captain nods approvingly, and the scene plays like the character has finally grown up. But in the very next episode, that exact same character is back to making the same reckless mistakes again.
Their midday energy before I even put my underwear out my butt.
Like the previous lesson never happened. Not challenged, not referenced, just quietly erased. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. Characters shift personalities depending on what the script needs that week. Someone who was confident suddenly becomes insecure. Someone who spent an entire episode apologizing for bad decisions is suddenly lecturing everyone else about leadership. It doesn't feel like a story moving forward. It feels like the writers hit the reset button after every episode. And that's where the tone problem starts creeping in too. Because Star Trek has always balanced thoughtful conversations with exploration and danger. But here, entire scenes play out like group therapy sessions that accidentally wandered onto a starship set.
What are you having? Something with a proof.
Characters gather in a room, talk about their feelings for 5 minutes straight, and then nothing changes. No new decision, no consequence, no momentum. Just another emotional speech floating into space, which makes the wasted potential even more frustrating. A show about young Starfleet cadets should practically write itself. Rivalries, impossible training missions, students making reckless decisions that force them to grow. That's drama. That's conflict. Instead, the series keeps circling the same emotional conversations, while the actual adventure stays parked in orbit.
We are the women time forgot. Optimism is me paddling my freaking canoe.
And every week, the audience notices it a little more. And that chaos becomes painfully obvious when you look at the tone of the series. One moment, the show tries to be a serious drama about trauma and emotional struggles. The next moment, it suddenly pivots into awkward comedy that completely undercuts the previous scene. In one episode, a cadet breaks down after a failed training mission that supposedly put lives at risk. The scene is filmed like a major emotional turning point. Quiet music, a mentor giving a speech about responsibility, everyone treating the moment like it's supposed to define the character moving forward. And then only minutes later, the tone flips. The same characters are joking around in the hallway like nothing serious just happened. Instead of letting the emotional moment carry weight, the show immediately deflates it.
It's not the load that breaks you, but how you carry.
That kind of whiplash happens constantly, and it makes the entire story feel unstable. Another major complaint fans keep bringing up is pacing. Episodes frequently spend huge amounts of time on conversations that don't actually move the story forward. There's a scene in one episode where the cadets sit around discussing the meaning of responsibility after a failed simulation. One character explains how the pressure of Starfleet expectations is overwhelming. Another responds with a long speech about leadership. The conversation goes on and on, nearly 10 minutes of dialogue, but by the end of it, nothing has changed. No decision is made, no consequence follows. The characters simply move on to the next scene as if the discussion never mattered. Moments like that are why viewers finish an episode and feel like very little actually happened. The frustrating part is that the premise should be perfect for storytelling. A group of Starfleet cadets training to explore the galaxy is an idea filled with possibilities.
They've been served the heart and the quadritesticles of their fathers before them.
Dangerous simulations, rivalries between students competing for command positions, first contact training exercises that test their judgment, ethical dilemmas where young officers have to make decisions that could affect entire worlds. The concept almost writes itself. But instead of leaning into those possibilities, many episodes stay locked inside classrooms, briefing rooms, or hallways, focusing almost entirely on internal drama between characters. The sense of exploration, the thing that defined the franchise for decades, is barely present. Longtime fans didn't fall in love with Star Trek because people gave speeches inside a lecture hall. They loved it because characters were constantly pushed into unknown situations where their choices mattered. The dialogue often doesn't help either. If you've been following the reactions online, you've probably seen some of the clips that fans keep sharing. In one scene that circulated widely, a cadet launches into a long speech about carrying the weight of the Federation's ideals on our shoulders. The speech goes on for nearly a full minute while the rest of the room stands there silently listening. It's clearly meant to sound inspirational, but the delivery feels strangely theatrical, like a monologue written for a stage play instead of a conversation between classmates. Moments like that end up feeling awkward instead of powerful, which is why viewers started sharing the clip ironically rather than taking it seriously. And that's where the frustration really begins to build, because the issues people are pointing out aren't small details.
You know what I want? I want to fall on my butt and die of humiliation. Man, my best friend to make me feel better. I want to change my mind 6 times before ordering, and
There's structural problems with how the show tells its stories. When emotional moments don't have consequences, when characters repeat the same lessons week after week, and when dialogue starts sounding like speeches instead of conversations, the entire narrative starts to feel disconnected. What makes it even more frustrating is the legacy attached to the franchise. Star Trek wasn't just another sci-fi series. It was one of the most influential science fiction universes ever created. For decades, it represented optimistic storytelling, thought-provoking ideas, and compelling adventures across the galaxy. Fans grew up watching characters face impossible situations and find creative solutions that reflected the best parts of humanity. So when a new series arrives under that banner and struggles to capture even a fraction of that spirit, the disappointment hits much harder. This isn't just another mediocre streaming show. For a lot of longtime viewers, it feels like watching a legendary franchise slowly lose the qualities that made it special in the first place. And that's why the conversation around the show keeps getting louder. Fans aren't just criticizing individual episodes anymore. They're questioning the overall direction of the project. Every new release sparks another round of debates, breakdown videos, and long threads analyzing why the series feels so disconnected from the tone and spirit of earlier Star Trek stories. Some viewers call it a missed opportunity. Others argue the show fundamentally misunderstands what made the franchise work. But almost everyone agrees on one thing: the concept had enormous potential. A show about young cadets learning how to become Starfleet officers could explore incredible ideas: leadership under pressure, ethical dilemmas in first contact scenarios, the responsibility of representing the Federation in unfamiliar parts of the galaxy. Those are exactly the kinds of stories that built the Star Trek legacy. Instead, what viewers are getting often feels strangely disconnected from that legacy. Episode after episode follows the same pattern: a dramatic speech about growth, followed by a reset the very next week. In one episode,
Now I'm just this, I guess. You are just on your way to the next you. Maybe we all are.
a cadet gives an emotional monologue about learning responsibility after a failed mission, music swelling, mentors nodding like it's a defining moment. Then the next episode arrives, and that same character is making the exact same reckless decisions again, like the lesson never happened. And when that pattern repeats week after week, the conversation around the series starts to shift. People stop debating the story and start debating the show itself, because if nothing changes soon, Starfleet Academy risks being remembered not for its adventures, but for how quickly the audience lost patience. Right now, the audience reaction is already starting to settle into something much more serious than temporary criticism. Week after week, the same complaints keep surfacing: inconsistent character growth, emotional moments that reset by the next episode, and a premise built for exploration that rarely leaves the classroom. At a certain point, viewers stop waiting for improvement and start deciding what a show actually is. and the verdict forming around Starfleet Academy is becoming hard to ignore. A series with a powerful idea that never figured out how to turn that idea into a real adventure. If that pattern continues, the conversation around the show won't be about where the story goes next. It'll be about where the franchise went wrong. And if nothing changes, Starfleet Academy won't be remembered as the next chapter of Star Trek. It'll be remembered as the moment the franchise forgot what made it work in the first place.